get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank and having nothing to do. Once or twice she peeked into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what's the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversations? So she was considering in her own mind, as well as she could, for the hot day made her feel very sleepy, whether the pleasure of making a daisy chain would be worth the trouble of getting up and picking the daisies. When suddenly a white rabbit with pink eyes ran close by her. She heard the rabbit say to herself, Oh dear, I shall be too late. Then it took a watch out of its waistcoat pocket, looked at it, and then hurried on. Alice started to her feet, for it flashed across her mind that she had never before seen a rabbit with a waistcoat, or a watch. So burning with curiosity, she ran across the field after it, just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole under the hedge. In another moment, down went Alice after it, never once considering in the world how she was going to get out again. The rabbit hole went straight on like a tunnel for some way, and then dipped suddenly down. So suddenly that Alice had not a moment to think about stopping herself before she found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep well. Down, down, down. I wonder if I shall fall right through the earth, thought Alice. How funny it will be to come out among the people that walk with their heads downwards. The antipathies, I think they're called. That didn't sound at all like the right word. So, she decided, I shall have to ask them what the name of their country is. Please, ma'am, is this New Zealand or Australia? Down, down, down. Then suddenly, thump, thump, thump. Down she came upon a heap of sticks and dry leaves, and the fall was over. Alice was not a bit hurt, and looking up, caught sight of the white rabbit again, just in time to hear it say, as it turned the corner, Oh, my ears and whiskers! How late it's getting! Then it was gone. Herself in a long, low hall lit by a row of lamps hanging from the roof. There were doors all round the hall, but they were all locked. And when Alice had been all the way down one side and up the other, trying every door, she walked sadly up the middle, wondering how she was ever going to get out again. Then she noticed a little three-legged table, and on it was a tiny golden key. And Alice's first idea was that this might belong to one of the doors in the hall. But alas, either the locks were too large, or the key was too small. But at any rate, it would not open any of them. However, on her second way round, she came upon a low curtain she had not noticed before, and behind it was a little door about 15 inches high. She tried the little golden key in the lock, and to her delight, it fitted. Opened the door and found that it led into a small passage, not much larger than a rat hole. She knelt down and looked along the passage into the loveliest garden you ever saw. How she longed to get out of that dark hall and wander about among those beds of bright flowers and those cool fountains. But she could not even get her head through the doorway. And even if my head would go through, thought poor Alice, it would be of very little use without my shoulders. how I wish I could shut up like a telescope. I think I could, if only I knew how to begin. In waiting by the door, so she went back to the glass table, half hoping she might find another key on it, or at any rate a book of rules for shutting people up like telescopes. By this time she found a little bottle, which certainly was not here before, said Alice. And tied around the neck of the bottle was a paper label with the words, "Drink me," beautifully printed on it in large letters. The bottle was not marked poison, so Alice ventured to taste it. It had a sort of mixed flavor of cherry tart, custard, pineapple, roast turkey, toffee, and hot buttered toast. And Alice found she would very soon finished it off.
Catch a falling star and put it in your pocket, never let it fade away. Catch a falling star and put it in your pocket, save it for a rainy day. For love may come and tap you on the shoulder some starless night. Just in case you feel you want to hold her, you'll have a pocket full of starlight. Catch a falling star and put it in your pocket, never let it fade away. Never let it fade away. Catch a falling star and put it in your pocket, save it for a rainy day. For a rainy day. For love may come and tap you on the shoulder some starless night. And just in case you feel you want to hold her, you'll have a pocket full of starlight. Pocket full of starlight. Catch a falling star and put it in your pocket, never let it fade away. Never let it fade away. Catch a falling star and put it in your pocket, save it for a rainy day. For a rainy, save it for a rainy day. For when your troubles start multiplying, and they just might, it's easy to forget them without trying. With just a pocket full of starlight, catch a falling star and put it in your pocket, never let it fade away. Never let it fade away. Catch a falling star and put it in your pocket, save it for a rainy day. Save it for a rainy day. Save it for a rainy day.
What a curious feeling, said Alice. I feel like I'm getting smaller and smaller, like a telescope that's shutting up. And so she was indeed. She was now only 10 inches high, and her face brightened up at the thought that she was now the right size for going through the little door into that lovely garden. But when she got to the door, she found she had forgotten the little golden key, and when she went back to the table for it, she found she could not possibly reach it. Her eye fell on a little glass box that was lying under the big glass table. She opened it and found in it a very small cake on which the words, "Eat me," were beautifully marked in currants. "Well, I will eat it," said Alice. "And if it makes me grow larger, I can break my way out. And if it makes me smaller, I can creep under the door. And I I don't care which happens. So she set off to work and very soon finished off the cake. Curiouser and curiouser, cried Alice. Now I'm opening out like the biggest telescope there ever was. Goodbye, feet! But when she looked down at her feet, they seemed to be almost out of sight. They were getting so far off. Then her head struck the roof of the hall, for she had grown to rather more than 9 feet high. And she at once took up the little glass key and hurried off to the garden door. Poor Alice. She was now too big again to get through the door. And she sat down and began to cry. She shed gallons of tears, until there was a great pool around her, about 4 inches deep and reaching halfway down the hall. After a time, she heard a little pattering of feet in the distance, and she hastily dried her eyes to see what was coming. It was the White Rabbit, splendidly dressed, with a pair of white kid gloves in one hand and a large fan in the other. He muttered to himself, "Oh, the Duchess! Oh, the Duchess! Oh! Won't she be savage if I kept her waiting?" Alice felt so desperate that she was ready to ask help of anyone. So, when the rabbit came near her, she began in a timid voice, "If you please, sir." The rabbit started violently, dropped the gloves and the fan, and scurried away into the darkness. Took up the fan and gloves, and, as the hall was very hot, fanned herself. Dear, dear, how queer everything is today. I wonder if I've been changed. But how to tell? She thought hard. I know, she said, clapping her hands in triumph. I'll see if I know all the things I knew yesterday. Let me see. 4 times 5 is 12, and 4 times 6 is 13. 4 times 7 is... Oh, dear. Well, let's try geography. London is the capital of Paris, and Paris is the capital of Rome. No, that's all wrong. I'll try and say a poem. How doth the little crocodile improve his shining tail and pour the waters of the Nile on every golden scale? How cheerfully he seems to grin, how neatly spread his claws, and welcomes little fishes in with gently smiling jaws. I'm sure those are not the right words. As she said this, she looked down at her hands and was surprised to see that she had put on one of the rabbit's white gloves. How can I have done that? She thought, I must be growing smaller. She got up and went to the glass table again to measure herself by it, and found, as near as she could guess, that she was now about 2 feet high and shrinking rapidly. She soon found out that the cause of this was the fan she was holding, and she just dropped it in time to avoid shrinking away altogether. That was a narrow escape, said Alice. And as she said these words, her foot slipped, and in another moment, splash! She was up to her chin in salt water. Her first idea was that she had somehow fallen into the sea. And in that case, I can go back by railway, she said to herself. But then she soon realized that she was in the pool of tears she had wept when she was 9 feet high. said Alice as she swam about. I shall be punished for it now, I suppose, by drowning in my own tears. That will be a queer thing. Just then she heard something splashing about in the pool a little way off, and she swam nearer to make out what it was. At first she thought it must be a walrus or a hippopotamus, but then she remembered how small she was, and she soon made out that it was only a mouse that had slipped in like herself. "Oh, Mouse," she said, "do you know the way out of this pool? I'm very tired of swimming about here. Oh, Mouse." The mouse looked round at her and said, "Why don't you swim to the shore?" It was getting high time to go, for the pool was getting quite crowded with the birds and animals that had fallen into it. There were a duck, a dodo, and an eaglet, and several other curious creatures. So Alice took the mouse's advice and swam to the shore, where she spied a large mushroom, about the same height as herself, and on it sat a large blue caterpillar with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah pipe. He looked at her for a long time in silence, and at last he took the hookah from his mouth and said, in a languid, sleepy voice, "Who are you? And are you content?" "Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir. You see, I think I must be about 3 inches tall, and that's such a wretched height to be." "It is a very good height indeed," said the caterpillar angrily, rearing itself upright as it spoke. It was exactly 3 inches high. "But I'm not used to it," pleaded poor Alice. The caterpillar yawned once or twice and shook itself. Then it got down off the mushroom and crawled away into the grass, merely remarking as it went, "This side will make you grow taller, and that side will make you grow shorter." "This side of what?" thought Alice. "Of the mushroom," said the caterpillar, just as if she had asked it aloud. And in another moment, it was out of sight. Perfectly round, it didn't strictly have any sides. But Alice stretched her arms round it as far as they would go, and broke off a bit of the edge with each hand, then put them in separate pockets for when she might need them.
unfold urban soundtracks across the galaxy.
Trust me, it's paradise. This is where the hungry come to feed. For mine is a generation that circles the globe in search of something we haven't tried before. So never refuse an invitation. Never resist the unfamiliar. Never fail to be polite. And never outstay the welcome. Just keep your mind open and suck in the experience. And if it hurts, you know what? It's probably worth it. You hope and you dream, but you never believe that something's going to happen for you. Not like it does in the movies. And when it actually does, you expect it to feel different. More visceral. More real. I was waiting for it to hit me.
Everything seemed to have changed since the swim in the pool, and the great hall with the glass table and the little door had vanished completely. So Alice set off walking to try to find them. It's rather curious, you know, this sort of life, thought Alice. I do wonder what has happened to me. When I used to read fairy tales, I fancied this kind of thing never happened, and now here I am in the middle of one. There ought to be a book written about me, that there ought.
Hit me.
As she thought this, she came suddenly upon an open place with a little house in it, about 4 feet high. She opened the front door and went in. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other. A duchess was seated on a 3-legged stool in the middle, nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron which seemed to be full of soup. There's certainly too much pepper in that soup, Alice said to herself, as well as she could for sneezing. There was certainly too much of it in the air. Even the duchess sneezed occasionally. And the baby was sneezing and howling. The only thing in the kitchen which did not sneeze was a large cat which was sitting on the hearth and grinning from ear to ear. Please, would you tell me, said Alice a little timidly, why your cat grins like that?
It's a Cheshire cat, replied the Duchess. And that's why.
I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, I didn't know cats could grin.
Well, all cats can, and most of them do.
I don't know of any. My cat Dina doesn't grin, Alice said.
You don't know much, and that's a fact. In fact, talking of facts, if everybody minded their own business, the world would go round a good deal faster than it does.
Care at all for the tone of this last remark, which would not be an advantage. Just think of the havoc it would play with the day and night. You see, she continued, the Earth takes 24 hours to turn round on its axis.
Talking of axis,
said the Duchess,
chop off her head.
Alice glanced rather anxiously at the cook to see if she meant to take the hint, but the cook was busy stirring the soup and did not seem to be listening. Then the Duchess flung the baby at Alice.
Here, you nurse it for a bit. I've got to get ready to play croquet with the Queen,
she said, and she hurried out of the kitchen. The cook threw a frying pan after her as she went out, but it just missed her. Alice caught the baby with difficulty, as it was a queer-shaped little creature. It began to grunt. There could be no doubt it had a very turned-up nose, much more like a snout than a real nose. Alice did not like the look of the thing at all. She carried it out into the open air, and it grunted again. Alice was just beginning to think to herself, now what am I going to do with this creature when I get at home? When it grunted a third time so violently that Alice looked down into its face with some alarm. This time there could be no mistake. It was neither more nor less than a pig, and she felt that it would be quite absurd for her to carry it further. So she set the little creature down and felt quite relieved to see it trot off into the wood. If it had grown up, she said to herself, it would have made a dreadfully ugly child. But it makes rather a handsome pig, I think. And she began thinking over other ugly children she knew, who might do very well as pigs, when she was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on a bough of a tree a few yards off. The cat only grinned when it saw Alice. It looked good-natured, she thought. Still, it had very long claws and a great many teeth. So she felt that it ought to be treated with respect. Would you please tell me which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go. As long as I get somewhere, Alice added as an explanation. Oh, you're sure to do that, said the cat. If you only walk long enough. Alice felt that this could not be denied, so she tried another question. What sort of people live about here? In that direction, the cat said, waving its paw around, lives a hatter. And in that direction, waving another paw, lives a March hare. Visit either you like. They're both mad. But I don't want to go among mad people, Alice remarked. Oh, you can't help that, said the cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad. How do you know I'm mad? Said Alice. You must be, said the cat. Or you wouldn't have come here. Alice didn't think that proved it at all. However, she went on. And how do you know you're mad? To begin with, said the cat, a dog's not mad. You grant that? I suppose so, said Alice. Well, then, the cat went on. You see, a dog growls when it's angry and wags its head when it's pleased. Now, I growl when I'm pleased and wag my tail when I'm angry. Therefore,
brown. Call it what you like, said the cat, licking its lips. Then it said, do you play croquet with the Queen today? I should like it very much, said Alice. But I haven't been invited yet. And you'll see me there, said the cat, and vanished. Further before she came in sight of the house of the March Hare. She thought it must be the right house because the chimneys were shaped like ears and the roof was thatched with fur. There was a table set out under a tree in front of it, and the March Hare and the Hatter were having tea at it. A dormouse was sitting between them, and the other two were using it as a cushion, resting their elbows on it. No room, no room, they cried out when they saw Alice coming. There's plenty of room, said Alice indignantly, and she sat down in the large armchair at one end of the table. Have some wine, the March Hare said in an encouraging tone. Alice looked all round the table, but there was nothing on it but tea. I don't see any wine. There isn't any, said the March Hare. Then it wasn't very civil of you to offer it. Your hair wants cutting, said the Hatter. He had been looking at Alice with great curiosity, and this was his first speech. You should learn not to make personal remarks, Alice said with some severity. It's very rude. The Hatter opened his eyes very wide on hearing this, but all he said was, why is the raven like a writing desk? Alice thought for some time, then confessed she had no idea. Nor I, said the Hatter. Nor I, said the Hare. Alice sighed. I think you might do something better with the time, she said, than waste it asking riddles with no answers. If you knew time as well as I do, said the Hatter, you wouldn't talk about wasting it. It's him. Let's say you've never even spoken to time. Perhaps not, Alice cautiously replied. But I know I have beaten time when I play music. Oh, that accounts for it, said the Hatter. He doesn't like beating. Now, if only you kept on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you like. For instance, suppose it was 9 o'clock in the morning, just time to begin lessons. You'd only have to whisper ahead to time, and around goes the clock in a twinkling. 1:30, time for lunch.
That would be grand, certainly, said Alice thoughtfully. But, I shouldn't be hungry for it, you know.
Not at first, perhaps,
said the Hatter.
but you could keep the time at 1:30 as long as you like.
Is that the way you manage? Alice asked. The Hatter shook his head mournfully.
Not I,
He replied,
we quarrelled last March, just before he went mad, you know.
pointing with his teaspoon at the March Hare.
It was at a great concert given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing. Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder what you're at.
Here the Dormouse shook itself and began singing in its sleep.
Twinkle, twinkle, twinkle.
And went on so long they had to pinch it to make it stop,
Well, I'd hardly finished the first verse
said the Hatter.
when the Queen jumped up and bawled out, "He's murdering the time! Off with his head!"
How dreadfully savage, exclaimed Alice.
And ever since that, he won't do a thing I ask. It's always 6 o'clock now.
Idea came into Alice's head. Is that the reason so many tea things are put out here? She asked.
Yes, that's it.
Said the Hatter with a sigh.
It's always tea time. Suppose we change the subject.
The March Hare interrupted, yawning.
I am getting tired of this. Either the young lady tells us a story.
I'm afraid I don't know one, said Alice, rather alarmed at the proposal.
Let the Dormouse shout.
They both cried, at which the Dormouse slowly opened his eyes.
I wasn't asleep.
He said in a feeble voice.
I heard every word you fellows are saying. Tell us a story,
Said the March Hare.
and be quick about it, or you'll be asleep again before it's done. Once upon a time, there were 3 little sisters.
The Dormouse began in a great hurry.
They were learning to draw,
He went on, slowing down slightly.
and they draw all manner of things.
Then he began yawning and rubbing his eyes.
Everything they drew began with an N.
The Dormouse had closed his eyes by this time and was going off into a doze. But on being pinched by the Hatter, it woke up again with a little shriek and went on.
Like the moon and memory and muchness. You say things of much as a muchness. Did you ever see such a thing as a muchness?
Really? Now you ask me, said Alice, very much confused. I don't think...
Then you shouldn't talk,
said the Hatter. This piece of rudeness was more than Alice could bear, and she got up in great disgust and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep instantly, and the last time she saw the Hatter and the Hare, they were trying to put it into the teapot.
party I ever was at in all my life, said Alice as she picked her way through the wood. Just as she said this, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it. That's very curious, she thought. But everything's curious today. So, I may as well go in at once. And in she went.
Controlled urban soundtrack across the galaxy. Paulo controlled urban soundtrack where words are only half the story.
Alice found herself in the long hall and close to the little glass table. Now, I'll manage better this time, she said to herself. She nibbled the growing mushroom, which she took from her right pocket, until she was tall enough to reach the top of the table. So she picked up the little golden key and unlocked the door that led into the beautiful garden. Next, she set at work nibbling at the shrinking mushroom, which she remembered was in her left pocket, until she was about a foot high. Then she could walk down the passage. And then, at last, she finally found herself among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. Stood near the entrance to the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners hard at work, busily painting them red. And these gardeners were playing cards. A 2, a 5, and a 7 of spades.
Look out now, 5,
said 2.
Don't go splash and play over me like that. They couldn't help it,
said 5 in a sulky tone.
7 jogs me elbow.
At which 7 looked up and said,
That's right, 5. Always lay the blame on others.
You can talk, said 5.
I heard the Queen say only yesterday that you deserve to be beheaded.
7 flung down his brush and had just begun,
full of all the unjust things,
when his eye chanced to fall on Alice as she stood watching them, and he checked himself suddenly. The others looked round also, and all of them bowed low. Would you tell me, said Alice, a little timidly, why you are painting those roses? 2 began in a low voice.
Well, miss, the fact is that this there ought to have been a red rose tree, and we put a white one in by mistake. And if the Queen were to find out, we should all have our heads cut off.
At that moment, Five, who had been anxiously looking across the garden, called out,
The Queen, the Queen!
and all 3 gardeners instantly threw themselves flat upon their faces as the royal procession approached. There were 10 soldiers, all shaped like the 3 gardeners, oblong and flat, and bearing clubs. 10 courtiers, ornamented all over with diamonds. The 10 royal children, ornamented all over with hearts. Then the guests, mostly kings and queens, whom Alice saw included the White Rabbit. They all came to a halt, and the Knave of Hearts grandly announced,
Pray silence for the King and Queen of Hearts!
Alice was rather doubtful whether she ought not to lie down on her face like the 3 gardeners. But she could not remember ever having heard such a rule at processions. And besides, what would be the use of processions, thought she, if everyone had to lie down so they couldn't see it? So, she stood still where she was and waited.
What's your name, child?
Asked the Queen. My name is Alice, so please, Your Majesty, said Alice very politely. But she added to herself, why, they're only a pack of cards after all. I needn't be afraid of them.
And who are these?
Said the Queen, pointing to the 3 gardeners who were lying round the rose tree. How should I know? Said Alice, surprised at her own courage. It's no business of mine. The Queen turned crimson with fury, and after glaring at Alice for a moment like a wild beast, screamed,
Off with my head! Off!
Nonsense, said Alice very loudly and decidedly. And the Queen fell silent. The King laid his hand upon her arm.
Consider, my dear, she is only a child.
The Queen turned angrily away from him. Then Alice heard a timid voice at her side.
It's a very fine day.
And she turned to see the White Rabbit, who was peering anxiously into her face. Very, said Alice. Where's the Duchess? She said she was coming to play croquet with the Queen.
Hush, hush,
said the Rabbit in a low, hurried tone. Then he put his mouth close to Alice's ear and whispered,
She's under sentence of execution.
What for? Said Alice.
She's boxed the Queen's ears.
The Rabbit began. Alice gave a little scream of laughter.
Oh, hush,
said the Rabbit in a frightened tone.
the Queen will hear you. You see, she came in rather late, and the Queen said, Get to your places for the croquet!
Shouted the Queen in a voice like thunder, and people began running about in all directions, tumbling up against each other. Alice thought she had never seen such a curious croquet ground in all her life. It was all ridges and furrows. The balls were live hedgehogs, the mallets live flamingos, and the soldiers had to double themselves up and to stand on their hands and feet to make the arches. The Queen invited Alice to join in, and the game began.
difficulty Alice found at first was in managing her flamingo. It would twist itself round and look up in her face with such a puzzled expression that she could not help bursting out laughing. And when she had got its head down, she found that the hedgehog had unrolled itself and was in the act of crawling away. And when she took aim, the doubled-up soldiers were always getting up and walking off to other parts of the ground. She soon came to the conclusion that croquet was a very difficult game indeed. The Queen fell into a furious passion and went stamping about and shouting, "Off with his head! Then, off with her head!" about once a minute. "It's a great wonder there's anyone left alive," thought Alice. She was looking about for some way of escape when she noticed a curious appearance in the air. It puzzled her very much at first, but after watching it for a minute or two, she made it out to be a grin, and she said to herself, "It's the Cheshire Cat. Now I shall have somebody to talk to." "How are you getting on?" said the cat, as soon as there was mouth enough for it to speak with. Alice thought, there's no use replying until its ears have come, or at least one of them. In another minute, though, the cat's whole head had appeared, and Alice put down her flamingo. "I don't think they play it all fairly. The balls and hoops keep running away." "And how do you like the Queen?" it asked. "Not at all," said Alice. "She's so extremely..." Just then she noticed that the Queen was close behind her listening, so she went on. "Likely to win? That... it's hardly worthwhile finishing the game." Said the King, coming up to Alice and looking at the cat's head with great curiosity. "It may kiss my hand, if it likes." "I'd rather not." "Don't be impertinent." "Off with his head," said the Queen without even looking round. And the executioner dutifully stepped forward. Taking one look at the Cheshire Cat, he stated that he couldn't cut off the head unless there was a body to cut it off from.
Hit me.
That he had never had to do such a thing before, and that he wasn't going to start at his time of life. The King maintained that anything that had a head could be beheaded, and that the executioner wasn't to talk nonsense. And the crowd, "You are all pardoned," which cheered her up, for she felt quite unhappy at the number of executions the Queen had ordered. They very soon came upon a griffin, lying fast asleep in the sun. "Oh, lazy thing," said the Queen, "and take this young lady to see the mock turtle." At this, the griffin sat up and rubbed its eyes. Then it watched the Queen till she was out of sight. Then it chuckled. "What fun!" "What is the fun?" said Alice. "Why, she is," said the griffin. "She never executes nobody, you know. Come on." They had not gone far before they came upon the mock turtle, sighing as if his heart would break. "Oh, it's all a show, that," said the griffin. "He hasn't got no real sorrow, you know." So they went up to the mock turtle, who agreed to tell his story, provided he wasn't interrupted. "Once," he said with a deep sigh, "I was a real turtle. And I went to school in the sea. The master was an old turtle. We used to call him Tortoise." "Why did you call him Tortoise if he wasn't one?" interrupted Alice. "We called him Tortoise because he taught us." "Really, you are very dull." "And he taught us reeling and rising, and the different branches of arithmetic. Ambition,
modern ants? Delicious. Then there was a mystery. Ancient and modern ant drooling, which included stretching and fainting in coils.
What was that like? Asked Alice.
Well, I can't show it you myself,
Said the Mock Turtle.
I'm too big. And the Griffin never learned it. Hadn't time,
Said the Griffin.
I went to the classical master there. What an old crab he was. He taught laughing and grief.
And how many hours a day did you do lessons? Inquired Alice.
10 hours the first day,
Said the Mock Turtle.
9 the next, and so on.
What a curious plan, exclaimed Alice.
That's the reason they're called lessons.
The Griffin remarked.
Because they lesson from day to day.
Both creatures hid their faces in their paws. At last, the Mock Turtle recovered his voice, and with tears running down his cheeks, went on.
You were perhaps never introduced to a lobster. So you can have no idea what a delightful thing a lobster quadrille is.
No, indeed, said Alice. What sort of dance is it?
2 lines on the shore.
Cried the Mock Turtle.
Grab your lobster by the claw, advance and back, advance and back. Order that lobster and change lobster. Then throw your lobster as far out into the sea as you can, and then after it, turn a somersault in the sea and back to land again.
Then the two creatures, who had been jumping about like mad things all the time, sat down again very sadly and quietly, and looked at Alice.
Would you like to see a little of it?
Asked the Mock Turtle. Very much indeed, said Alice. So they began solemnly dancing round, while the Mock Turtle sang this song.
Will you walk a little faster instead of biting towards me? There's a porpoise close behind us, and he's treading on my tail. See how eagerly the lobsters and the turtles all advance? They are waiting on the jingle. Will you come and join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you join the dance? You can really have no notion how delightful it will be when they take us up and throw us with the lobsters out to sea. But the snail replied, too far, and gave a look at us. Said he thanked the Viking kindly, but he would not join the dance. Would not, could not join the dance. Would not join the dance. What matters is how far we go, his scaly friend replied. There is another shore, you know, upon the other side. The further off from England, the nearer is to France. Then turn your pale, beloved snail, but come and join the dance. Will you, won't you, will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you join the dance?
Thank you, said Alice. It's a very interesting dance to watch, although she felt very glad it was over at last.
Now, tell us your story,
said the Griffin.
Oh, yes, do,
implored the Mock Turtle. But just as Alice had begun telling the curious tale of what had happened to her that day, a cry of, "The trial's beginning!" was heard in the distance.
Come on,
cried the Griffin, who took Alice by the hand and hurried off with her. What trial is it? Alice panted as she ran. But the Griffin only answered,
come on,
and ran all the faster, leaving the Mock Turtle far behind.
I still believe in paradise. But now at least I know it's not some place you can look for. Because it's not where you go. It's how you feel for a moment in your life. If you find that moment, it lasts forever. forever, last forever, last forever, last forever, last forever, last forever, last forever, last.
Polo controls urban soundtracks across the galaxy.
The King and Queen of Hearts were seated on their throne when they arrived, with a great crowd assembled about them. All sorts of little birds and beasts, as well as the whole pack of cards. The Knave of Hearts was standing before them, in chains, with a soldier on each side to guard him. And near the king was the White Rabbit, with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll of parchment in the other. In the middle of the court was a table, with a large dish of tarts upon it. They looked so good that they made Alice feel quite hungry. As judge and wore his crown over a wig. He did not look at all comfortable, and it was certainly not becoming. And that's the jury box, thought Alice, and those 12 creatures all writing on slates are the jurors.
Herald, read the accusation,
said the king. On this, the White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet, and then unrolled the parchment scroll and read as follows.
The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts, all on a summer's day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole those tarts and took them quite away. Call the first witness,
said the king.
Call my name.
Witness was the Hatter. He came with a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other.
I'll beg your pardon, Your Majesty,
he began.
For bringing these in, but I hadn't quite finished my tea when I was sent for.
Take off your hat, said the king.
It isn't mine,
said the Hatter.
Stolen?
The king exclaimed, turning to the jury, who instantly made a memorandum of the fact.
I mean, I keep them sell,
said the Hatter.
You see, I'm a hatter.
The Queen put on her spectacles and began staring hard at the Hatter, who turned pale and fidgety.
Give your evidence,
said the king.
And don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot.
Just at this moment, Alice felt a very curious sensation, which puzzled her a great deal until she made out what it was. She was beginning to grow larger again.
I wish you wouldn't squeeze so,
said the Dormouse, who was sitting next to her.
I can hardly breathe. I don't know anything,
continued the Hatter, who was trembling so much that he had shaken off both his shoes and was kneeling on the floor of the witness box.
Well, if you don't know anything about it,
said the king,
you may stand up. I can't go no lower,
said the Hatter.
I'm on the floor as it is.
Here, a guinea pig cheered and was immediately suppressed by the officers of the court.
You may go,
said the king to the Hatter, who hurriedly left without even waiting to put on his shoes.
And just take off his head outside,
the Queen added. But the Hatter was out of sight before any officers could catch him. witness was the Duchess's cook. She carried a pepper box in her hand, and the people near her all began sneezing at once.
Give your evidence,
Said the king.
Shan't.
Said the cook. The king looked anxiously at the White Rabbit, who said in a low voice,
Your Majesty must cross-examine this witness.
Well, if I must, I must.
the king said with a melancholy air.
Well, what's our tart's made of?
Pepper, mostly.
Said the cook.
Treacle.
Said a sleepy voice behind her.
Behead that dormouse!
The queen shrieked out.
Suppress him! Pinch him! Or with his whiskers!
Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Went down the hill the other day, so got happy and stayed all day. Went down the hill the other day, so got happy and stayed all day. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. When you didn't stay long, only then brother was dead. When you didn't stay long, only then brother was dead. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Oh, Lordy, my trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God.
For some minutes, the whole court was in confusion, getting the dormouse turned out. And by the time they had settled down again, the cook had disappeared.
Call the next witness.
Said the king, looking somewhat relieved he didn't have to deal with the cook again. Alice watched the White Rabbit as he fumbled over the list, feeling very curious to see what the next witness would be like. For they haven't got much evidence yet, she said to herself. Imagine her surprise when the White Rabbit read out, at the top of his shrill little voice, the name... Alice! Here! Cried Alice, quite forgetting in the flurry of the moment how large she had grown in the last few minutes. And she jumped up in such a hurry that she tipped over the jury box with the edge of her skirt, upsetting all the jurymen onto the heads of the crowd below. And there they lay, all sprawling about. Oh, I beg your pardon, she exclaimed in a tone of great dismay, and began picking them up again as quickly as she could. Unfortunately, in her haste, she put Sidney the Lizard back in the jury box head downwards, who eventually managed to right himself with considerable difficulty, but then seemed too overcome to do anything but sit with his mouth open, gazing up into the roof of the court. About this business of the cakes, the king said to Alice. Nothing, said Alice. Nothing whatever, persisted the king. Nothing whatever, said Alice. That's very important, the king said, turning to the jury, who by this time had recovered their slates and chalks and were writing furiously. Unimportant, Your Majesty, interrupted the White Rabbit in a very respectful tone. No, unimportant, of course, no, I meant, the king hastily said. Some of the jury wrote important, while the others wrote unimportant.
Jury, consider your verdicts,
cried the king.
No,
said the queen.
Sentence first, verdict afterwards.
Stuff and nonsense, said Alice loudly. The idea of having the sentence first.
Hold your tongue,
said the queen, turning purple. I won't, said Alice.
Off with her head,
the queen shouted at the top of her voice. Nobody moved, for Alice had grown to her full size by this time. Who cares for you, she said. You're nothing but a pack of cards. At this, the whole pack rose up into the air and came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tried to beat them off, and found herself lying on the bank, with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the trees upon her face. Wake up, Alice, dear, said her sister. Why, what a long sleep you've had. Oh, what a curious dream, said Alice. And she told her sister, as best as she could remember them, all the strange adventures that you've just heard. And when she had finished, her sister kissed her and said, It was a curious dream, dear. Certainly. But now run into your tea, it's getting late. So Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran, as well she might, what a wonderful dream it had been.
How about you?